On November 5, 1946, a police chief walked into a federal courtroom in Columbia, South Carolina, sat down on the witness stand, and admitted that he had beaten a decorated soldier in both eyes with a blackjack. He said it on the record, under oath, in front of a judge. The jury took 30 minutes, they let him go, and the courtroom broke into applause. That's not the worst part. The worst part is what the system did before, during, and after that trial to make sure the man who confessed would walk free. Because this was not a failure of justice. This was justice working exactly the way it was built to work. The soldier's name was Isaac Woodard. He was 26 years old. He had spent 3.5 years in the Army. He earned a battle star for unloading ships under enemy fire in New Guinea. He received an honorable discharge from Camp Gordon, Georgia on February 12, 1946. He was still in uniform when they took his eyes. He had been a civilian for less than a day. It started on a Greyhound bus. Woodard asked the driver, a man named Alton Blackwell, if he could use the restroom at a stop outside Augusta. Blackwell cursed at him. Woodard said, "Talk to me like I'm talking to you. I'm a man just like you." That was it. That was the crime. A black sergeant had told a white bus driver to speak to him like a human being. Blackwell did not forget it. When the bus pulled into Batesburg, South Carolina, he stepped off and found the town's police chief, Lynwood Shull, sitting in the patrol car. He told Shull a soldier had been making a disturbance. He did not mention the disturbance was a bathroom request. Shull pulled Woodard off the bus. Lynwood Shull was 40 years old. He was 5'9", and he weighed well over 200 pounds. He had been Batesburg's police chief for 8 years. His father held a patronage job running a local prison farm. 2 of his brothers served in the military during the war. Shull did not. He stayed home and he carried a blackjack, a leather weapon with a spring-loaded handle and steel shot packed in the tip. His police uniform had a pocket sewn into the pants leg just to hold it. Shull dragged Woodard into an alleyway, out of sight of the bus. He hit him across the head, then marched him toward the town jail. On the walk, Shull asked if Woodard had been discharged. Woodard answered yes. Shull cracked him again and told him the correct answer was yes, sir. Woodard grabbed the blackjack out of Shull's hand. The other officer, Elliot Long, pulled his revolver and said, "Drop it or I'll drop you." Woodard dropped the weapon. Shull picked it back up and beat him unconscious. When Woodard came to on the ground, Shull drove the end of the blackjack into each of his eyes. Over and over, he hit him so hard the weapon broke, and Woodard was left blinded. The next morning, Isaac Woodard could not see. He did not know where he was. He did not know what town he was in. They dragged him in front of a local judge, bleeding, blended, with partial amnesia. The judge convicted him of drunk and disorderly conduct. They fined him $50. No evidence of drinking, no lawyer, no doctor. It took 2 more days before anyone gave him medical attention. His family did not know where he was for 3 weeks. When doctors at the VA hospital in Aiken finally looked at him, both eyeballs had been ruptured irreparably in the sockets. Permanent, total. Isaac Woodard would never see anything again for the rest of his life. And the Army's response was to deny him full disability benefits because the blinding happened a few hours after his discharge papers were signed. A technicality. Hours. That should have been the end of the story. Blinded soldier, buried in a VA hospital, no benefits, no press, no name. But the NAACP got the case. Their executive secretary, Walter White, reached out to the biggest name in American broadcasting, Orson Welles. On July 28, 1946, Welles read Woodard's sworn affidavit on national radio. He did not know who the officer was. Nobody did. So he called him Officer X, and he made a promise on the air. He said he would find him. For 5 straight weeks, Welles hammered the story. He hired private investigators, and he dug through police records. Then a soldier who had been on the bus wrote to the NAACP. He had heard the broadcast. He said it was Batesburg. Within days, they had Shull's name. Welles went back on the air. "Officer X, we know your name now. Now that we found you out, We will never lose you. You cannot get rid of me. 20,000 people showed up to a benefit concert at Lewisohn Stadium in New York. Joe Louis hosted, Billie Holiday performed. Woody Guthrie wrote a song called The Blinding of Isaac Woodard and sang it that night. They raised $10,000. Woodard stood on that stage, blind, in sunglasses, and told the crowd, I spent 3.5 years in the service of my country and thought that I would be treated like a man when I returned to civilian life. But I was mistaken. On September 19, 1946, Walter White sat across from President Harry Truman in the Oval Office and told him what Shull did to Woodard. Truman stood up from his desk. My God, I had no idea it was as terrible as that. We've got to do something. 5 days later, Truman ordered federal charges against Lynwood Shull. Now here's where it gets ugly, because the trial was not a trial, it was a performance. November 5th, 1946, Federal Courthouse, Columbia, South Carolina. The trial started and ended the same day. The jury was all white, every single one of them. South Carolina was 40% black at the time, the highest in the country next to Mississippi. Black citizens could not get on the voter rolls because of poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation. The jury pool was drawn from voter rolls. So the people who would decide Lynwood Shull's fate were chosen by a system that had already decided black people did not count. The prosecution had months to prepare. They interviewed one witness. One, the bus driver, Alton Blackwell, the man who had caused the whole thing. They did not bring a single independent medical expert to explain the force required to rupture 2 eyeballs in their sockets. Not one. Judge J. Waties Waring later called the prosecution's performance a gross dereliction. Think about that. The federal judge presiding over the case said the federal prosecutors did not do their job. Woodard took the stand wearing a brown suit and green sunglasses. Court staff had to guide him to the chair. He told the jury he was beaten for saying yes instead of yes, sir. He told them the police jabbed a billy club into his eyes. Beaten. Then Lynwood Shull took the stand. He claimed Woodard pulled a gun on him. No gun was ever found. No gun was ever produced. But Shull also said something the jury apparently did not care about. He admitted under oath that he had repeatedly struck Isaac Woodard in the eyes. The man confessed in a federal courtroom to blinding a decorated veteran. On the record, the defense attorney's name was Jefferson Davis Griffith, named after the president of the Confederacy. He stood in front of that all-white jury and said, "If you rule against Shull, then let this South Carolina secede again." When he cross-examined Woodard, he started shouting racial slurs at the blind man on the witness stand. Judge Waring had to stop him. Confederacy, 30 minutes. That is how long the jury deliberated. Some reports say 15. Not guilty. The courtroom applauded. People clapped for the man who had just confessed to blinding a soldier. Woodard had already gone back to his hotel. When he got the news, he cried. Then he went outside and told reporters he was not mad at anybody. "I just feel bad. That is all. I just feel bad." Now here's what Woodard didn't know. What happened in that courtroom didn't just destroy him. It transformed 2 of the most powerful men in the country. 1 month after the acquittal, President Truman signed Executive Order 9808, creating the first presidential committee on civil rights in American history. 18 months later, he signed Executive Order 9981, desegregating the entire United States Armed Forces. Judge Waring, the man who watched Shull confess and walk free in his courtroom, never recovered from it. He had been a Charleston aristocrat, and he had accepted segregation his whole life. His wife Elizabeth sat through the trial. She called it one of the great shocks of her life. Waring called it his baptism by fire. He spent the rest of his career issuing civil rights rulings from that same bench. His dissent in Briggs versus Elliott in 1952 became the legal blueprint for Brown versus Board of Education. The case that ended segregation in American schools started in the mind of a judge who watched an all-white jury applaud a confessed criminal. Woodard's blinding desegregated the military. It radicalized a federal judge, and it set the legal foundation for Brown versus Board of Education. One soldier asking to use a restroom changed the trajectory of American law. He never knew. He moved to New York. His wife left him. He lived in the Bronx for 46 years, blind and alone. He died on September 23, 1992, at the VA hospital. He was 73 years old. Lynwood Shull lived in the same town where he did it. He was never punished. He was never charged again. He died on December 27, 1997. He was 95 years old. He outlived the man he blinded by 5 years. In 2018, 72 years later, Batesburg, Leesville finally vacated Isaac Woodard's disorderly conduct conviction. In 2019, they put up a historical marker at the spot where Shull beat him. The bottom is written in Braille. It tells the whole story, everything Shull did. It just does not mention his name. A police chief confessed in open court to blinding a war hero. A jury took 30 minutes. The courtroom clapped, and 73 years later, the memorial still protects the man who did it.